Lisa, thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for coming out. I can't quite see you, but I understand there are a lot of people out there. Thank you very much for coming. And I look forward to chatting with EJ in a few moments. But before we do, I just wanted to say a few words about the election and where we are today. Because I know there are a lot of people who are frightened, a lot of people who are extremely unhappy, and I would not be telling you the truth if I didn't tell you that Tuesday night was a very, very depressing evening for me. But I want to maybe begin by telling you that as a result of having the privilege and the opportunity of running all over this country, going to 46 states during my campaign, I ended the campaign far, far more optimistic than when I began that campaign. And the reason for that is all over this country, I saw extraordinarily beautiful people, working people, young people who love this country and who are determined to do everything that they can to make the United States of America the kind of nation we know we can become. And the other point that I want to make as we move into the Trump era is to understand that real change and real politics never takes place from the top on down. It always occurs from the bottom on up. And what that means, in my view, is that when millions of people stand together and they refuse to allow demagoguery to divide us up by race, by the country we were born in, by our sexual orientation, when we stand together by the millions, we can stop Mr. Trump or anyone else from doing bad things to this country. Just mentioned, what I have always believed is that election days are very, very important days, to be sure, and elections are enormously important. But politics is not just about elections. If you think about our history as a nation and the profound changes that have taken place, what you understand is that change only takes place when millions of people look around them and they say that the status quo is not working and are prepared to fight for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. I just want to, in terms of the election, make 3 points. Number one, in case you don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, Hillary Clinton ended up winning the popular vote by what we think, after all the votes are counted, by about 2 million votes. Number two, if you are a progressive, on issue after issue, whether it is raising the minimum wage to a living wage, whether it is pay equity for women, whether it is rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and creating millions of decent-paying jobs, whether it is reforming a broken criminal justice system or a broken immigration system, whether it is making public colleges or universities tuition-free, whether it is demanding that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes. On all of those issues and more, the American people are on our side. Don't ever forget that. During the course of his campaign, Mr. Trump, and I should tell you that in that campaign I was as active as I could be during the last week of that campaign. I was in 12 battleground states giving 21 speeches at rallies all over this country, because I thought that it was absolutely imperative that we do everything that we can to make sure that Hillary Clinton was elected and not Donald Trump. But it didn't turn out that way. And here is where we are today. It seems to me four things. Number one, 5 things, who knows? During the course of this campaign, which clearly, and we have to acknowledge this, was certainly one of the most unusual campaigns ever won by a candidate. Mr. Trump said a whole lot of things, and sometimes I think they would just come off the top of his head. Toward the end of the campaign, he was actually using the term that many Democrats don't use. He was saying that he was going to be the champion of the American working class. That's what he said. Well, Mr. Trump, we have a list of everything that you said, and we are going to hold you to account. What I think Mr. Trump did, and this speaks to why I personally believe we need major reforms of the Democratic Party. What Mr. Trump said and talked about is something that the pundits here in Washington have not a clue about, and the corporate media has very little understanding about. And that is that what he understood to be true, and it is true, despite the fact that today we are far better off economically after 8 years of Obama than we were when Bush left office. We see the very wealthiest people in this country becoming phenomenally richer. They see large corporations enjoying record-breaking profits, and yet they are working not at one job, they're working at 2 jobs, they are working at 3 jobs. There are people all over this country who are 55, 60 years of age. They have worked their entire lives, and now they are going to be retiring soon. And you know what? Half of those older workers do not have a nickel in the bank for retirement. There are young people who went deeply into debt, $30,000, $50,000, $80,000 in debt in order to go to college. But when they leave school, they find that the only jobs they can get are jobs which pay them $12, $14 an hour, not enough to repay their debt. That is the reality for millions of people in this country. And that is the reality of a middle class which has been in decline for the last 40 years. That is the reality of 43 million fellow Americans who today are living in poverty, something that we do not talk about at all, not mentioned on television, and some in dire poverty. We are living in a nation which has a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, in which the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. And that is the reality that Mr. Trump perceived to be true. And he said, I hear you are hurting. And I hear and understand you're worried about the future for your kids. And I alone can do something about it. And people voted for him. Now let me just tell you some of what Mr. Trump talked about. And we're going to hold them accountable. Mr. Trump said, I believe we should expand Social Security. I believe in a Medicare for All program, but that is what he said. And pay attention to see what he now does. The question that will be resolved pretty quickly is whether or not everything that he was saying to the working families of this country was hypocrisy, was dishonest, or whether he was sincere. And we will find that out soon enough. But number one, no cuts, says Mr. Trump, to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Mr. Trump says he wants to invest $1 trillion in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. That is a good sum of money. That is exactly what we should be doing. And we can create millions of good-paying jobs if we do that. Mr. Trump, that's what you said on the campaign trail. That's what we look forward to seeing from you. I happen to believe that the federal did not say that, but what he did say is we should raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour. Not enough, but a start. And we will hold him to those words. Mr. Trump said that Wall Street, dangerous, doing bad things. He wants to reestablish Glass-Steagall legislation. I look forward to working with him. Mr. Trump said he wants 6 weeks of paid maternity leave. Every other major country on earth has, I think, at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave, but this is a start. This is a start. We look forward to working with him if he is honest about that. Mr. Trump said throughout his campaign, a cornerstone of his campaign, he wants to change our disastrous trade policies. As somebody who voted against every one of these trade policies, I look forward to working with him to make that happen. I think what you will see on Capitol Hill is many Democrats will be prepared to work with Mr. Trump if he turns out to be sincere about the promises he made during the campaign. If those promises turn out to be hollow, if they were nothing more than campaign rhetoric, we will not only oppose his economic policies, we will expose that hypocrisy as well. There is an area where I think I can speak for virtually every member of the Democratic caucus, will not be working with Mr. Trump. We will not be involved in the expansion of bigotry, of racism, sexism, homophobia. This country, as you all know, since our inception, has struggled to overcome discrimination of all forms. And that is racism and sexism, xenophobia, and homophobia. For hundreds of years, extraordinarily brave people have stood up, and some of them have died in the struggle to end discrimination in America. And I say to Mr. Trump from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for millions of fellow Americans, Mr. Trump, we are not going backwards in terms of bigotry. We're going to go forward in creating a non-discriminatory society. And in that regard, I call upon Mr. Trump to rescind the appointment that he made of Mr. Bannon. A president of the United States should not have a racist at his side. Unacceptable. there's another area which concerns me very much. And that is, despite virtually all of the scientific evidence, Mr. Trump, throughout his campaign, proclaimed that his view is that climate change is a hoax created, for whatever reason, in China. And I say to Mr. Trump, climate change, and gives up on the effort to combat climate change all over the world. China, Russia, India, other countries are going to say, why are we doing it? Why are we transforming our energy system? Look at America, they're not doing it. So millions of us have got to stand up and tell Mr. Trump to read a little bit about science. Listening to the scientific community and not the CEOs of the fossil fuel companies.